This video took forever to get out. HitFilm has been crashing on me when trying to edit, and after testing various other editing software options, which was a disappointing experience, I eventually ended up coming back to HitFilm and figuring out a way to avoid the crashing. As all of this went on, one thing became more and more clear to me. Months ago, I had estimated that we would be able to release Epic Wars 1 through 5 on Steam in the second half of 2022, and I later changed that to end of 2022. That estimate does not reflect reality very well. In a project like this, there is a lot of work to do, even for a team of full-time developers, which we're not. So releasing the games in 2022 would be impossible, or technically it would be possible if our goal were to release a mediocre product without any polish or personal touch. The work we have neatly falls into two categories. The first is essential work, things that we have to do to be able to port the games. And though it's intimidating how much there is, we have actually gotten through a significant chunk of it already. The second type is everything on top of that, balancing changes, user experience improvements, polishing, things that we don't have to do, but which very visibly improve the quality of the end product. We can't sacrifice any of the core work, and while we can in theory sacrifice the finesse, that goes against my principles as a game developer. The franchise has had dedicated fans for over a decade, and if everything goes as planned, we will all be able to enjoy these games for many years to come. So, we will not sabotage their quality to speed up the release by several months. Epic Wars 1 through 5 will come out on Steam sometime in 2023, probably in spring. As for Epic Wars Saga, we do not know its release date yet, but remaking that game will take a long time. It is an even larger and more involved project than the mainline games, because Saga has the highest potential of the existing games to take off and become a popular game, but it needs a lot of care and work to get it to the point where it has that potential. Right now, we are mainly focusing on porting the numbered titles, but we are already actively planning and laying the foundation for Saga's remake to prosper. With this out of the way, the next set of questions we have is about pricing. How much will each of the games cost? My current plan is to make Epic Wars 1 through 5 cost $5 as a bundle, and I think the entire collection will be worth more than $5. But I don't want to set the price to anything higher, because that would miss the point of why we're porting these games. And I believe Steam suggests automatic price adjustments for different countries, which means if $5 sounds like a lot to you in the country you live in, it might actually not cost as much for you. When the Epic Wars Saga remake comes out, it will be free to play on mobile, as well as probably on the web, and possibly Steam, and it will have optional microtransactions just like the current Epic Wars Saga to keep the game alive. In that regard, we will need to strike a balance to give players an incentive to spend money on the game without making it so that you can only progress or win if you spend money. Right now, I believe microtransactions are discouraged in Epic Wars Saga because you get just enough for free to have everything you would realistically want to have to beat the game. And because of balancing issues, a lot of units and heroes that cost crystals end up being kind of pointless. As in, you have to spend money if you want to get enough crystals to get most of those units. But the units themselves are bad, so you wouldn't have much of a reason to do that in the first place. But I don't want to quote-unquote fix that by making microtransactions and paying mandatory to make any significant progress in the game. So we are looking for that sweet middle ground. You don't have to pay, but if you can and want to, you get some nice rewards out of it. As for extra content, I don't see any of the games in this franchise getting DLCs in any foreseeable future. Epic Wars 1 through 5 will have pretty much all of their content available upon release, and of course Saga will be a free-to-play game, so it wouldn't make much sense to release paid DLCs for it. But personally, I would like to avoid the idea of paid DLCs entirely, and if, for example, there is a future Epic War game that warrants extra content, ideally, that content will be added to the base game, and players won't have to pay extra for it. Of course, the financial side is important here, so we're going to need to find some way for the franchise to grow and succeed, but I don't think paid DLCs would help much with that. Will all the games be launched from a single launcher, or will they all be separate? Great question. As I've already implied, Epic Wars 1 through 5 will all have a single launcher. I also think this should be nice in encouraging people who play some of the games a lot to try the other games. especially since none of them will be wasted space, at least in my eyes. Do you want to make Epic War games on mobile too or console? Mobile, yes, the Epic Wars Saga remake will be mainly aimed at mobile, and after we release Epic Wars 1 through 5 on Steam, I think I will take the months after to port the games to mobile and release them on Google Play and the App Store. As for consoles, probably not in the foreseeable future. The franchise would have to get big enough for that to happen, so let us all hope. Can I play Epic Wars Saga offline like it was before, or will it be online only? So, were you ever able to play Epic Wars Saga offline? I know that right now you need to have an internet connection and connect to the server to be able to play, and it is possible that it will remain that way, especially since you will need a connection to get the full experience with all of the game's features provided, but I will try to make the game playable without an internet connection, so you can, for example, play in a long car ride without using data, or if you don't have data, and then just sync the progress back up once you're connected. Two questions. First, will you be allowing downloading older versions of Epic Wars Saga? So, when the remake comes out, there will only be one version at a time, and you will not be able to switch between its versions. However, you will be able to download and play the current version of Epic Wars Saga, which you can already play with Flash Player or with Supernova on Congregate, and you will be able to play the current version of the game indefinitely until its servers stop working, and no one knows when that will be. Second, is there a chance for a premature revival of the Epic Wars Saga / Legendary Saga servers so that people can download further content while waiting for the real port to come out? Unfortunately no, ArtLogic Games owns the current servers of Epic Wars Saga, and there is not a real way to transfer that server to me, or change the game to use different servers instead, as I have not been able to get Epic Wars Saga's code working. And at this point, even if there is a chance that in theory I could get it to work after a time, the ports take priority. Plus, I have no idea who handles the Legendary Saga servers or even that game as a whole. I'm not sure if this information is readily available, but what platforms is the team planning to port the game to? I'm on Mac, so a native version for that would be awesome if it is already planned. Happy to say that it is. Epic Wars 1 through 5 are planned to come out on Steam and subsequently mobile, and the Steam version should work for Windows, Mac or Linux. It will be iffy if problems arise on, for example, the Mac version, because I don't have a reliable way to test that. However, I'm just going to trust in Godot's exports and hope that no issues arise. Next we have two similar questions. Will you update Epic Wars Saga and add more units, bosses, heroes? And are you going to add something new to the game, like new currency or allies? I can best answer these questions with another question I got. Yes. Next, another two similar questions. As a new member of the Discord, I would like to know what are the biggest planned changes that we should expect game-wise. Like new camps, units, stages. And I know that the games will be changed, but can we get a bit more detail on exactly how much? Also, did you know that there are several units that the player cannot get their hands on? So unfair. I know, it is ridiculous. And it will probably stay that way. Let me try to put into perspective how much the games will change without giving away too much. Epic Wars Saga will change quite a bit. You can fully expect some of its mechanics to change in some ways, and for the game to get new units and heroes, but possibly have some existing units and heroes removed, depending on how much they contribute. Take that how you will right now. And for the game to basically get a lot more playable content, since right now, the vast, overwhelming majority of the game's mileage is replaying existing levels that you have already beaten to grind them, as opposed to playing new levels. So you can expect a lot more content in that regard, and that's one of the reasons that the remake will take a while. The current amount of content in the game is a tad unsatisfactory, and the fact you have to grind for so long to get through the game turns off a lot of casual players, including me in the past. So, Epic Wars Saga? Not a simple beast. But let's turn our attention to the topic of Epic Wars 1 through 5, which are a little more straightforward, and the remakes for which already loom on the horizon. The biggest limitation we have is not having artists, and it's not just a simple matter of there not being artists on our team. We can't get just any artist and pump out more content for the games. We could, but that would be pretty stupid unless the artists draw in a style that actually matches the games. And the fact that almost each of the games has its own distinct art style only makes this worse. So you cannot expect us to add many new units, because we don't have the art for those new units. But what you can absolutely expect is gameplay improvements, which would solve a lot of the major issues that the games currently have, and make them more of a satisfying experience throughout. Extensive balancing, some added and adjusted lore, UI changes, as well as a lot of polishing and playability improvements. The size and scope of all of the games will not change much, but I truly believe it when I say that after the relaunch is out, you will find it hard to go back to the Flash versions. And then we have 2 questions from GoMan, whom I have to call out like this because the questions the guy asked are good and really hard for me to answer without giving away a lot of my plans for the games. So I have to answer in a way that lets you know something, so that you get some worth out of asking these questions, without completely spoiling all the fun. Game modes. How many of them are planned for the games? I actually have no idea. I don't know. I mean, I have ideas, but they're not currently set in stone like a lot of the other changes are. I don't think the games will get a ton more game modes, and the reason for that is that they can be a little tricky to make work. Imagine this: Epic War 4 has normal, hard, and epic modes, and hard mode of each level in Epic War 4 is just the normal mode of that level, but the enemies have 1.5 times as much health. Epic mode, they have twice as much health and do twice as much damage. Doesn't that sound a little uninspired to you? And more so than just uninspired, aka replicating that content instead of providing new valuable content, it would also naturally mess with the balancing, because the specific buffs that the enemy gets or the specific nerfs that the player gets might end up mattering in very different proportions depending on what exactly is on the level. So you can theoretically fill the games with a lot of game modes like this and give the illusion of them having a lot of content, but that would dilute the games and lead to an experience that is not quite as genuine. Of course, some game modes have a genuine point to them. For example, a survival mode in Epic War 5, where you see how long you can defend for until you eventually get overwhelmed, would be a pretty neat idea. But modes like this simply do not have priority over the rest of what we're working on, so all I can say in regards to this is we can get some new unusual game modes like this if time allows before the relaunch, or perhaps in an update after the relaunch. But I would of course want to make sure the game mode actually adds something real to the game, as I want the content that exists in the games to carry its own weight and not feel cheap. A genuine playing experience is something I care about a fair bit. An example of a mode that will almost certainly make it to the games is Trials in Epic War 2. Levels that you can play after you've beaten the main campaign and are potentially stronger, and it's okay if they're too hard for some people to beat because they're not part of the game's main campaign. And you can still claim you've beaten Epic War 2 if you've completed the campaign, but have not beaten all the trials. That being said, if you can't beat all the trials, you may wanna get good. Where were we? What kind of changes to the game mechanics are being done? Off the get-go, I can say that my philosophy is to try to not make a lot of changes to the core game mechanics of each of the games. For an easy example, Epic War 3's units do not have attack types and strengths and weaknesses to certain attack types, whereas Epic War 4's units do, and I think that is a good thing that gives depth to Epic War 4. However, I do not want to just add attack types and strengths and weaknesses to Epic War 3 like they are in Epic War 4, because there is something to the simplicity and free-flowing of Epic War 3's gameplay, and I'm not trying to make 2 different Epic War 4s. I want Epic War 3 to stay as Epic War 3 by keeping its core elements that distinguish the game from the other games of the series, and turn it into the best game that Epic War 3 can feasibly be. So a lot of the game mechanics will stay the same, but I can provide a few examples of what will change. You bring up the example of Poison and Burn in Epic War 5, and how they don't do enough damage to actually be serious status effects, and I agree that they should do more damage and pose a greater threat to whomever gets smitten by that effect. But I don't think this is quite game mechanics, I think it's more about balancing. These 2 effects will still function in many ways the way that they function now, but their damage output will change. I think the main mechanic that I want to reveal will be changed right now is area of effect damage and the way it's handled, because in Epic Wars 1 through 4, pretty much all melee units have area of effect attacks, which means with one attack, all enemy units that attack reaches take damage from it. And the ranged projectiles generally either only hit one unit or an unlimited amount of units that they reach. The relaunch will go hard on a concept that already kind of exists in Epic War 5 but isn't used to the best of ways, which is the hit limit. Each attack has a limited number of enemy units that it can hit. So if a hobbit reaches 100 enemy goblins with his attack, he's not gonna do damage to all of them, he's probably just gonna do damage to one of them. And a dwarf's axe can maybe hit up to 5 units, but not an infinite amount of them. So tightly gathered crowds will no longer be as much of a joke. And this also gives us a nice balancing tool to distinguish different units from each other and alter how powerful they are. And for another, more specific example, the Lord of Hell in Epic War 2 is not going to just stand there and do nothing while he has the chance to keep pounding the ground and doing damage to the castle. I'm pretty sure everyone agrees that that doesn't make a lot of sense. So you can expect him to be a genuine threat and not someone you have to cheese by only sending a specific set of units after him without even having a good way to determine which units work. And then he will finally be the BFB, the badass final boss that he was meant to be. In the future, can we play with the Black Tiger in Epic War 5? Probably not. The Black Tiger, he comes at the turning of the black tides. The Black Tiger... Why? Why Tiger? I already made this mistake. The Black Tiger... Okay, let me regather my thoughts. The Black Tiger is an impressive, menacing opponent, and he sounds like a very desirable unit for you to have as the player. I know some of you guys, especially one particular person, would love for the player to just have access to all of the enemy units and not have them kept away from the player's reach in frustration. But as I mentioned before, I believe in a genuine game experience, and that includes not just the gameplay content and features available to the player, but other aspects as well, such as world building. And I believe that the player getting access to every unit the enemy has ever had access to cheapens the game. It makes it feel like there isn't anything more to the game and its world than what is directly available to us as the player through the interface that the game provides to us, so that we from this world can interact with the game's world. Darn, I sound pretentious. Simply put, the fact that there is more to the game and its world than what we can get our hands on makes our brains think that there can be a whole lot more even than what the game shows to us. And there is also the fact that it wouldn't make much sense for the player to get their hands on every enemy unit, especially once the player is meant to kill because of how big a threat they are, and not simply subdue and enslave or befriend. So perhaps, and I'm not spoiling which units exactly, perhaps the player will be able to get their hands on some of the currently enemy exclusive units in some of the games. But the Black Tiger is a big no. Not to be racist, but the Black Tiger... I almost said the Black Tiger again. So I'm just gonna move on. So with Epic War 4 they had a bubble upgrade tree, which I really liked. That makes 2 of us. The thing is, if I upgraded any of my troops, I couldn't really see a difference. Like, they were stronger of course, but there weren't any armor changes or weapons that were slightly bigger and better. Is that something that can be introduced in the remake of Epic War 4? Unfortunately, as I already mentioned, we are restricted by the art that we have, and maybe a few slight changes we can make to it at points. But no, unfortunately, without having an artist to draw in the same style that the units are already in, at which point we can just make a new game entirely. That is not something that we can do. I definitely get the appeal. It doesn't affect the gameplay, but it is a nice feature that helps the experience. So you are absolutely making a good point. It's just not something that we can feasibly do in Epic War 4 or any of the 5 games. Will there be a Lobster Titan? Potentially. Is there going to be modding support, not only as in map making, but maybe even creating your own units? So the issue with modding units in the Epic War franchise as opposed to something like Totally Accurate Battle Simulator is that the units are made up of 2D sprites, not polygons, not primitive shapes. In other words, not anything the player can easily alter. And if you want to add your own units, whether you draw them yourself or add sprites from other games, even if you go through all the lengths of adding animations like that, chances are it's going to look ridiculously out of place and subtract from the experience. And the potential things you can do with setting their stats just won't be enough to make up for it. So I don't think there will be modding support in the foreseeable future, but at some point an Epic War game might arrive that would make it feasible to mod levels, units, or any other part of the game. Who knows? Oh, and while we're on that topic, would a new game be in the style of Epic War 3 to 5 or 1 to 2? Very nice question. I think we all have preferences as far as that's concerned. I used to outright like the style of Epic Wars 3 to 5 more. Now I'm not that sure anymore. But the thing to keep in mind here is that each style has its own advantages and allows for its own great gameplay experiences. I already have an understanding of how I would like a new game to be, and all I'm willing to say for now is that it will incorporate advantages from both of the styles, and it will be a first-person shooter. No. Thankfully, no. Like, if you really think about it, one of the selling points of the franchise is that it is not a first-person shooter. Are you planning to release games that will continue the Epic War pentology, like Epic War 6, 7, and so forth, or are you going to do something closer to Epic War Saga? Nice question. Well, first we have the relaunch of the existing games, and the remake of Epic War Saga is pretty clearly closer to Epic War Saga. But I do have plans and hopes to expand in both directions, with the main pentology being the series of games that are mostly aimed for desktops and provide a more or less cinematic and immersive experience, and Epic War Saga, which is already an outlier from that, can instead focus on the things that make mobile games good, without a lot of the cringe that makes numerous mobile games as bad as they are. Telling you, it is one heck of a project to attempt. But of course, who is better suited to attempt it? I know these series of games weren't completely story-driven, but would there ever be a story toggle option should one be implemented if a story was written for the whole series? I already mentioned that I want to add a bit more lore to at least some of the games, and I think story will be a bigger focus in future Epic War games than it has been in existing ones. So you can look forward to that, especially if you appreciate a good story. But I'm not sure what a story toggle would be for. By default, there would simply be a story with an option to skip it for people who already know the story or really want to focus more on the gameplay for one reason or another. What techniques are you likely to learn from NinjaKiwi making good games? When it comes to marketing, at least, marketing good games. Okay. NinjaKiwi is a great example for us to sort of go off of and roughly, mildly base our expectations off of, because the Bloons franchise has a lot of similarities to the Epic War franchise, in that they were flash games that gradually expanded in their scope and got a following, until the developers were able to port them on Steam and mobile, and it is now the major player in the tower defense genre. There are a lot of similarities in the two franchises' beginnings, and I think NinjaKiwi were able to handle their franchise well enough to allow it to rise to the heights that it is at now, meaning overall competence, not disappointing with any of the new entries, and a passion for quality. I like to think I have all those characteristics, and the team we have so far is awesome, which should give high hopes about the Epic War series. And I say this because NinjaKiwi has admitted to not paying a lot of attention to marketing and not being professional marketing experts. They kind of just let the quality of their work speak for itself. And it is a little tougher to do now than it was back then when NinjaKiwi rose to prominence, so we are going to need to have more than just high quality on our side, but you can rest assured that high quality and making the series worth remembering is probably the biggest priority that I have for the games. And speaking of the team, what kind of team members is the team currently missing? Artists, etc.? Artists? Customer support representatives? Maybe more, but I'm too hungry to delve deeper now. Are there developer chats? Of course there are. And if so, how active are they and what kind of stuff do you discuss there? It's really mainly been related to the games and the relaunch, and we discuss things whenever we get more things to discuss. I'm not entirely sure what you were expecting from this question, but if you mean how many parties and off-topic discussions we hold there, currently not that many. Which in a way is a good sign, as we are hard at work bringing the games to life. Will you add content to YouTube when you have added the new content on Steam? What do you mean by content to YouTube? Generally, YouTube content means videos, things like Q&As, discussions, streams, let's plays. I am certainly making this kind of content. This video is an example. And once the relaunch is out, you can expect me to play through the relaunched games on stream after enough time has passed for people to beat them themselves. And there will be more Q&As, teasers, and so forth. What type of lobsters do you like? Oh yeah, have you committed any crimes in the year 2004? I have committed the notorious crime of turning 2. I don't know why I'm still not in jail for that, but who knows? Can we help with anything? You guys are already helping so much with your comments, encouragement, feedback, discussions in the server. participation in the community, and participation in the community. So, all I can say is thank you guys and keep that up. It is awesome to see the server thriving with discussions among people who are passionate about the games and speculating on what will happen in the future, especially when I know what will actually happen. So yes, you guys are great, keep it up, and I'm hoping to get to the next stage when you can actually play the games and support the franchise as soon as we can. So this was a handful, and I hope I have clarified some of the questions you guys have had, as well as provided some food for thought for what we might want and expect to see in the relaunch. I can't wait until everything is ready. We've got a lot of exciting stuff to show you. But for now, all we can do is continue working on the games and ensuring quality progress. And all you can do is wait and anticipate and discuss and predict and play the Flash versions and play the mods. And simply put, have an awesome time.